The fallen assassinate was a cold, silent night when the door to the small human cabin creaked open. A figure stumbled in, barely able to keep herself upright. She was a woman, tall and strong, with dark hair matted in sweat and blood. Her clothes were torn, and her face was bruised. She collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. Her body was battered, but her eyes, those eyes still burned with a fierce determination. The man inside the cabin, a simple farmer named Leo, had heard. The door? He had expected the usual animal trouble, or maybe the wind. But this was different. He grabbed a small gun that he kept near the door, just in case. He was no fighter, but he was prepared to defend himself. When he saw the woman on the floor, his heart raced. She looked like she had just been through a war. He hesitated, staring at her for a moment. Was she a thief? A criminal? A soldier? But something in her eyes made him pause. There was fear in them, yes, but also something else: desperation. She was not here to hurt him, he could tell. Leo put the gun down, his hand trembling, and rushed to her side. "Are you all right?" he asked, kneeling beside her. His voice was gentle, as if speaking too loudly might scare her away. The woman's lips parted, but she could barely speak. She was gasping for air, trying to push herself up, but her body wouldn't obey. Leo noticed the deep gash on her side, blood staining her clothes. Without thinking, he tore off part of his shirt and pressed it against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice more firm now. The woman's eyes flickered, as if she wanted to say something, but all she could do was shake her head. Her body shook, not from the cold, but from the pain. "Don't worry," Leo said softly. "I'll help you." He wasn't sure how, but he knew he couldn't just leave her there. She looked at him, her eyes full of doubt, but she didn't resist. There was something about the way he spoke, something in his kind gaze, that made her believe he would not harm her. Leo helped her to a nearby chair and fetched some water from a barrel. She drank it slowly, her hands trembling as she held the cup. As she drank, Leo couldn't help but wonder who she was. Why had she come here? And why was she so badly injured? "Who are you?" he asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. The woman stared at him for a long moment before her voice came, rough and barely a whisper. I'm no one," she said, her eyes downcast. "Just a ghost." Leo frowned. Her words didn't make sense. But before he could press further, there was a loud knock at the door. The woman's body stiffened at the sound. She looked up at Leo with wide eyes. "You have to hide me," she pleaded, her voice urgent. "They're coming for me." Leo felt his heart race. Who was after her? And why? Without a word, he grabbed her arm and helped her up. He led her to the back of the cabin, where a small room with a trapdoor was hidden under a pile of hay. The woman didn't hesitate. She ducked inside, and Leo quickly covered the trapdoor with the hay again. He moved to the door, his heart pounding. In his chest, he didn't know who was on the other side, but he couldn't let them take her. He didn't even know why he was protecting her. He didn't know anything about her. But something in his gut told him it was the right thing to do when he opened the door. 3 men stood outside, their faces cold and hard. They wore dark clothing, and their eyes scanned the area, searching for something or someone. Leo swallowed hard and tried to act casual. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice steady. The men looked at him, their eyes narrowing. One of them, the tallest, stepped forward. "We're looking for a woman," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "She's injured. She passed through here, didn't she?" Leo's mind raced. Should he lie? Should he tell them the truth? His eyes darted to the cabin, but he didn't see anything out of the ordinary. "I haven't seen anyone," Leo said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Maybe you're mistaken." The man didn't look convinced, but he didn't push further. "If you see her, let us know," he said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "She's dangerous. Don't get involved." With that, the three men turned and walked away, leaving Leo standing at the door, his heart still racing. He closed it slowly, his hands shaking. The woman was still hiding in the small room, and Leo couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. But the question remained, who was she, and why was she being hunted by such dangerous people? He didn't know the answers. But one thing was certain, his life had just changed forever. The pursuit begins. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the scent of danger with it. Leo stood by the door, his heart still pounding, but now with a new kind of fear for the woman he had decided to protect. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't signed up for any kind of trouble, but here it was. And he knew that trouble was far from over. Inside, the woman rested on a simple bed in the corner of the cabin. Her breathing had slowed, but her eyes remained sharp, scanning the room as if waiting for something to happen. She hadn't spoken much since the strangers had come by, and Leo could see that her silence wasn't just from fear, it was from a deep, ingrained habit of not trusting anyone. "You need to rest," Leo said gently, though he wasn't sure how much she was even listening. She was far too alert for someone so exhausted. "I can't," she whispered, barely audible. "They'll come for me. I can't stay here." Leo shook his head. "They're gone for now. You're safe." But even as he said the words, he knew they weren't true. Something in the woman's eyes told him the danger wasn't over, and it wouldn't be long before more men would show up. She glanced at him, her sharp gaze sizing him up. "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into. You should have turned me away when you had the chance. You're in danger now." Leo felt a cold shiver run down his spine, but he didn't back down. He wasn't going to be intimidated. "I've made my choice," he said. "I'm not turning you away." The woman's lips curled into a faint smile, almost as if she were impressed by his stubbornness. But the smile didn't last. "Your choice could cost you your life," she warned, her voice colder than the wind outside. "I'm the most dangerous person in the galaxy, and those men won't stop until they have me." Leo didn't know what to say. He couldn't imagine what kind of enemies would chase a person so relentlessly. He wanted to ask who she was, but he sensed it was something she wasn't ready to share. The silence between them was thick, almost suffocating. Then, without warning, a loud bang echoed outside the cabin. It wasn't the wind or an animal. This time, it was deliberate. Leo's heart raced as he rushed to the window. He saw the figures, more of them, 5 this time, moving swiftly toward his cabin, their silhouettes unmistakable in the fading light. "They're back," the woman said, her eyes narrowing. "You need to hide now." Leo's hand shook, but he didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat and rushed to the back room where the trapdoor was hidden. He couldn't let them find her. He couldn't let them hurt her or him. He helped the woman to her feet, supporting her weight as she stumbled, still weak from her injuries. "We don't have much time," Leo muttered under his breath. "Then make it count," she said, her voice stronger now, as though the adrenaline of danger was waking something inside her. She reached for his arm, holding him back for a moment. "You're doing the right thing, Leo, but you need to trust me. You need to stay hidden too." Leo didn't argue. He helped her into the hiding place, then turned back to the door. His heart was still racing, but there was no time for fear. The footsteps were getting closer, and he knew they had to be ready. With the trapdoor secured, Leo quickly made his way to the small kitchen and grabbed a few tools. He didn't know what he was going to do, but he knew he had to keep calm. He had to think clearly. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, quick and sharp. A voice called out, deep and rough. "We know you're in there. Open up. We're not asking again." Leo's breath caught in his throat. He tried to steady his hands as he held the knife behind his back. He wasn't a fighter, but he couldn't let them find her. He had to protect her. He moved slowly toward the door, keeping his back against the wall, his heart pounding in his ears. The men on the other side didn't sound patient. And from the way they spoke, they didn't care much about what happened to him either. "Please," Leo said, his voice trembling. "I don't know who you're looking for, but there's no one here. Just leave." The voice on the other side scoffed. "Don't play games. We know she came this way. Open the door now, or we'll break it down." Leo's mind raced. He had to make a decision, and fast. If he opened the door, they would come in and find her. If he didn't, they would force their way in. Either way, there was no escaping the fight that was about to happen. He glanced quickly at the back room where the woman was hiding, then back to the door. The choice was clear. He wasn't going to let them hurt her. With a deep breath, Leo steadied himself. He had no idea how he was going to get out of this, but one thing was certain. He would never let her be captured. Not while he still had the strength to fight. The door exploded open before he could make a move. A battle of wits. The cabin was silent, the tension thick in the air. Leo's pulse pounded in his ears as he pressed his back against the wall, the weight of what was happening sinking in. His mind raced with questions, none of which he had answers to. Who were these people chasing her? Why were they so relentless? And most importantly, how was he going to get out of this alive? The men outside were no longer just looking for a fugitive. They were hunting for something more, something dangerous. Leo could feel it in his gut. They weren't just going to let her go. They would burn down the entire cabin to get what they wanted. He heard the footsteps outside, loud and deliberate. There were more of them now, maybe 7 or 8, all heavily armed. Leo had no idea how he was going to protect the woman hidden behind the trapdoor, but his instincts told him he couldn't run. He wouldn't run. Not when he had already chosen to protect her. The woman who had been silent since the last encounter finally spoke. Her voice was low, almost a growl, but there was clarity in it that Leo hadn't heard before. "They're coming in," she said, her eyes narrowing, as if she could hear their footsteps as clearly as he could. "And they won't leave without me." Leo turned to her, his heart racing. "How do you know they'll find us?" She met his gaze, and for a moment the mask of fear and exhaustion was gone. What remained was a dangerous, calculating look, as if she had been in this situation countless times. "Because I trained them to find me," she replied, her voice sharp. "And if I'm not careful, they'll destroy everything." Leo's mind scrambled for answers. He wasn't equipped for this kind of fight. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a man who wanted to live a peaceful life. But as the footsteps grew louder, a sense of duty burned inside him. He couldn't let her fall into their hands. Not after everything they had been through together. "What can we do?" Leo whispered, desperation creeping into his voice. The woman's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "We fight back." Leo blinked, confused. "Fight back? How?" She gestured toward the room where she had been hiding, where Leo had placed her when the men first arrived. "You've got the tools you need. You just need to think. They won't expect a trap." Leo's eyes widened as her words sank in. A trap. It was the one thing they hadn't planned for. He had tools, simple things like rope, nails, and scrap metal, nothing that would take down an army. But maybe enough to make things difficult for the intruders. The woman continued, her voice steady as she explained, "They'll come in through the front, but they'll split up, looking for us. We need to force them to separate. If they're not all together, we can take them out one by one." Leo wasn't sure if he was ready for this, but his instincts screamed at him to act. This was the only chance they had. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "All right, I'll do it." The woman seemed to relax slightly, but only just. She wasn't fully recovered, but she was more prepared than Leo to face what was coming. He could see it in the way she moved. Every gesture was purposeful, even in her weakened state. "Listen," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "The moment they come in, you'll need to make a noise. It'll draw them toward the back of the cabin. While they're distracted, I'll set up the second part of the trap." Leo nodded again. He didn't know how this would work, but he was willing to try. He waited, his hand tight around a piece of metal that he had grabbed from the workbench. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. The first sound came soft footsteps in the snow outside. Then the sound of a door opening, followed by the harsh commands of the intruders. They were moving in. They were close. Leo's heart thudded louder in his chest. He breathed out slowly, trying to steady himself. He had no time to waste. The woman's plan was simple but risky. He had to trust her. He had no choice. The first man stepped through the door. Leo struck the metal against the floor, making a loud noise that echoed through the cabin. The intruder froze, his eyes narrowing. As he listened, the other men were quick to follow, their boots heavy on the wooden floor. Leo's pulse quickened. The moment of truth was here. The man who had entered the cabin turned toward the noise, just as Leo had planned. He motioned for the others to move forward, all of them now focused on the back room. But the moment their attention shifted, the woman moved fast. She was silent, slipping through the shadows like a ghost. Leo watched as she set the trap in motion. A swift movement of rope and metal. She wasn't just an assassin, she was a strategist, and Leo realized how much he had underestimated her. The first man stepped into the back room, his footsteps heavy. The trap was triggered, and suddenly, a loud crash filled the air. The man stumbled, caught in a net of rope, struggling against it. The rest of the intruders rushed in, but they weren't expecting the chaos. They didn't see the second trap. Until it was too late, for the first time, Leo saw the woman's true strength. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting back. And now, with the tables turned, the enemy was on the back foot. The assassin's secret: the cabin was still. But the air inside felt charged, as though a storm was about to break. Leo had just caught his breath after the chaos of the trap fighting. Off the attackers, managing to outwit them, but now there was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the quiet of victory, but the quiet of something unknown. Something that was just out of reach. The woman, the assassin, sat in the corner, her wounds tended to, but still bleeding through. Her face was a mask, unreadable. But her eyes, those eyes betrayed her emotions. They flickered with something deeper than just fear or anger. It was as if there was something she hadn't told him yet. Something important that she was keeping buried. Leo couldn't ignore it anymore. He could feel the weight of her silence, as if her very presence in the room was filled with secrets. He had already made the choice to protect her, but now he wondered, who exactly was he protecting? And why had she come to him? There was no time to waste in uncertainty. He had to know. He walked over to her slowly, careful not to startle her. "There's something you're not telling me," he said, his voice steady but filled with the quiet urgency he'd kept buried until now. "You said they'd destroy everything. You said they were coming for you. Why?" The woman's eyes locked onto his, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she didn't answer. She seemed to be weighing his words, searching his face, as though deciding how much she could trust him. Her lips parted, but the words that came next were slow, almost reluctant. "I wasn't always like this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't choose this life, but I became something. Something I didn't want to be." Leo frowned, sensing the gravity of what she was about to say. "What do you mean? You're an assassin, aren't you?" She nodded, but there was no Pride in the gesture. It was almost a confession. I was trained for it, forced into it. They took me when I was just a child, turned me into a weapon, and I did what they wanted. I killed. Without question, without hesitation. I became the best, but somewhere along the way, I started to hate it. I hated myself. Leo felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a fugitive he had taken in. This was someone who had been broken, shaped by forces far more powerful than anything he could imagine. He had seen the coldness in her eyes. But now, there was something different. Vulnerability, regret. "Why are they after you then?" Leo asked, his voice softer now as he began to understand. "Why don't you just walk away?" Her expression hardened again, but it was brief. "I tried. I left. But the people I worked for, they don't let their assets go. They won't allow me to disappear. I'm too dangerous to be free." Leo shook his head. "But you're not that person anymore, are you? You're not the killer they made you." Her gaze dropped to the floor, the weight of her own words heavy in the room. "I wish it were that simple, but they won't let me go. They don't want me free. They want to control me. And if I try to escape again, they'll kill anyone who tries to protect me." A knot tightened in Leo's stomach. The truth was clear now. This woman wasn't just running from her past. She was running from a monster that had created her. A monster that would stop at nothing to drag her back into the darkness. He could see it now, the layers of pain. It's a fear that had nothing to do with the physical wounds she carried. "I'm not going to let them take you," Leo said, his voice firm, more certain than he felt. He wasn't sure how he would protect her, but he couldn't just stand by and let her be dragged back into that life. "I've already made my choice. I'll fight for you." The woman looked up, her expression still guarded but softening. "You don't know what you're getting into," she warned, her voice filled with quiet intensity. "If you continue helping me, you'll be marked too. They'll come for you just like they came for me." Leo didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid." There was a long silence between them, as if the air itself was holding its breath. And then, finally, the woman spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "You should be." Her words hung in the air like a warning. But it wasn't fear that gripped Leo now. It was something else. It was resolve. This wasn't just about saving her. It was about something bigger, facing a force that would stop at nothing to control them both. As the night deepened outside, Leo knew this was only the beginning. He had stepped into a fight much bigger than he had ever expected, and there was no turning back now. But one thing was clear: whatever came next, he wasn't going to run, not anymore. The turnaround, the night felt endless. The quiet hum of the forest around Leo's cabin did little to calm the anxiety gnawing at his insides. For the first time since he had decided to protect her, he began to feel the weight of what that choice meant. The assassin, the woman he had taken in, was still lying low, recovering from her wounds. But the tension in the air was palpable. Every sound outside made him jump. Every rustling in the trees a reminder of the danger that had followed her here. Despite the traps, the cunning plans, and the courage they had both shown so far, the cold truth was unavoidable. They couldn't keep hiding forever. Leo could feel it in the way the air crackled with unease. The woman had warned him he had chosen a life of constant danger by helping her. And now, with each passing moment, the noose was tightening. She was sitting near the window when Leo returned from checking the perimeter. Her expression was distant, eyes scanning the dark sky. She hadn't said much in the past few hours, but Leo could see the thoughts swirling in her head. She wasn't just thinking about survival. No, she was calculating, as always, planning her next move. "Have you heard from them?" Leo asked, his voice barely breaking the silence. His throat felt dry, like he was waiting for something that He wasn't sure he was ready to hear. The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze on him, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she was studying him, measuring him for something unknown. Her lips parted, and for a brief moment, Leo thought she would tell him that it was over, that they had run out of options. But instead, she said something he wasn't expecting. "I found another way," she said, her voice low but sharp, like the cutting edge of a blade. Leo froze, confusion rushing through him. "What do you mean, another way?" Her eyes flickered, the weight of unspoken truths behind them. "There's someone who can help us. Someone I never thought I'd turn to, but we don't have a choice anymore. I've been tracking them for years, waiting for the right moment. But now," her gaze darkened. "Now it's time to act." Leo felt a shiver crawl down his spine. He had no idea who this person was, but if the assassin was willing to put her trust in them, it had to be serious. Who is it? And why trust them? She sighed heavily, her shoulders slumping for the briefest moment, a flicker of vulnerability flashing across her usually stoic face. "Because they owe me. They owe me more than I can explain, and right now I'm willing to collect on that debt." Leo's gut twisted. "You're not planning on going back to them, are you? After everything you've said about them?" "No," she said quickly, a sharpness returning to her voice. "I'm not going back to them. Kana, I'll never go back to that life. But this person," she hesitated, her face clouded with a mix of anger and regret. "They can offer us protection. They can give us a fighting chance. But it comes at a cost, a heavy one." Leo's mind raced. Protection, fighting chance. But at a cost, that was never a good sign. Still, he knew this might be their only hope. They couldn't keep hiding forever. The enemy was closing in, and Leo could see the exhaustion in the assassin's eyes, even though she tried to hide it. She had been running her whole life. "So, what do we do?" Leo asked, his voice quiet but firm. The decision was looming, and he had a strange feeling that everything was about to change. Whether he was ready for it or not, the woman stood up, her movements quick and purposeful, despite the injuries that still clung to her like shadows. "We leave tonight," she said, her eyes sharp and focused. "We find them and we make our move. But it's going to get worse before it gets better. And you'll need to be ready for whatever comes." Leo didn't hesitate. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of 100 decisions, 100 moments that had led them here. "I'm ready," he said, feeling the gravity of his own words. The stakes had never been higher. The woman studied him for a long moment, her eyes softening ever so slightly. "Then, let's go. There's no time to waste." The final showdown. The cold wind howled through the trees as Leo and the assassin made their way deeper into the forest. Their steps were careful, deliberate, as though the very ground beneath them was watching, waiting for the inevitable. Every crack of a branch, every rustling leaf made Leo's heart skip a beat. They were close. He could feel it in his bones. The woman, though still weakened from her injuries, moved with a grace that suggested she was in her element. She was a predator, a ghost slipping through the darkness, her focus sharp and unyielding. Leo, on the other hand, felt every ounce of his humanity pressing in on him. Doubt, fear, the weight of knowing that there was no turning back. Ahead, the dim outline of a distant building came into view. It looked abandoned, decayed, like something forgotten by time. But Leo knew better. It wasn't an abandoned place. It was a place to make their final stand. The assassin stopped suddenly, her posture rigid. "We're almost there," she said, her voice quiet but full of intent. "But there's something you need to understand, Leo. When we walk through that door, there's no going back. Everything we've been running from will catch up with us." Leo nodded, his grip tightening on the makeshift weapon he had crafted. "Nothing More than a sharpened piece of metal, but it would have to do. He wasn't a fighter, not like the people chasing them, but he wasn't going to just stand aside either. Not now. Not when they were this close to ending it all. "I know, Leo," said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty creeping in. "I'm with you, all the way." The assassin's eyes softened for a brief moment, the hint of something human flashing in her usually guarded gaze. "I never wanted you involved in this," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the wind. "You never should have had to fight this battle." Leo stepped closer to her, offering a reassuring nod. "Maybe I didn't choose this, but I'm here now. And I'm not walking away." With one final glance toward the looming building, the woman turned and motioned for Leo to follow her. They moved swiftly, their footsteps barely making a sound, until they reached the entrance. It was a heavy door, metal and rusted, but it would open. It had to. Inside, the darkness was suffocating, the air thick with tension. Leo's eyes strained to adjust, but the woman seemed to see perfectly, her movements fluid as she scanned the area. She knew the layout. She knew what to expect. Leo, on the other hand, felt out of place, but his resolve held steady. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the darkness, sending a chill down Leo's spine. It was calm, too calm, as if the speaker already knew what was going to happen. "I knew you'd come," the voice said. "But I didn't expect you to bring company." From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, tall, imposing, with eyes that seemed to peer straight through Leo. The assassin's past had come to claim her, at last. "Alaric," the woman said, her voice a mix of hatred and resolve. "I should have killed you when I had the chance." Alaric chuckled, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can stop me? After everything I've done? After everything you've become? You're just a broken tool, a weapon they built and then discarded. And now, you're nothing but a shadow of what you once were." The woman's fists clenched, but she didn't respond. Leo could feel the tension building, the weight of every past mistake and every scar in her body pressing down on her. This was more than just a fight for survival. This was a reckoning. "You're wrong," she finally said, her voice steady now. "I'm not broken, and I'm not your tool anymore." The air around them seemed to crackle with the intensity of their words. Leo felt the weight of it, all the lives that had been lost, the pain that had been endured, the decisions that had led them to this moment. There was no turning back now, no escape, only the fight. Alaric stepped forward, his hand reaching for a weapon at his side. But before he could pull it out, the woman was already moving. Her speed was a blur, a flash of deadly precision as she closed the distance between them. Leo didn't hesitate. He didn't think, he just acted. As the woman and Alaric clashed in the center of the room, Leo rushed to flank the enemy. Using every ounce of his instincts to outmaneuver the fighters who had trained their entire lives for moments like this, the clash of metal rang out as the two combatants fought with a fury Leo had never seen before. It wasn't just strength or skill. It was something deeper, a need to end it all, to finally close the chapter on a past that had controlled their lives for far too long. But Alaric wasn't going to go down easily. He was everything the woman had, Sita, master of manipulation, a monster hidden behind a mask of charm and power. And as the battle raged on, Leo realized just how dangerous the path he had chosen truly was. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about something far more personal: redemption, revenge, and the weight of a future that could finally be rewritten. A new beginning. The silence that followed the final clash was deafening. The dust from the battle hung thick in the air, settling over the broken remains of what had once been a place of refuge. Leo stood among the wreckage, his breath ragged, his body sore from the fight. But it wasn't the physical pain that weighed heavily on him. It was the emptiness that followed the victory. He had expected a sense of relief when it was all over. He had hoped that once the fight ended, once Alaric was defeated, everything would go back to normal. But now, standing in the aftermath of the chaos, Leo realized that normal was no longer a place he could return to. Beside him, the woman, the assassin, was wiping the blood from her blade, her movements slow but deliberate. Her face was stoic, as if the fight had left her exhausted but not relieved. Not yet. She had finally confronted the monster from her past, but the scars, the weight of everything they had been through, still lingered. "You did it," Leo said softly, his voice unsure. He wasn't sure if he was speaking to her or to himself. "It's over." The woman didn't respond immediately. She just stared at the destruction around them, her eyes distant. "It's never really over," she finally said, her voice low. "Not for someone like me." Leo watched her, feeling the gravity of her words. She had always been a ghost, running from the past, from the life she had been forced into. But now, she was standing in the ruins of it all, and the future, stretched out before her and written, uncertain. "What happens now?" Leo asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. The woman took a deep breath, her gaze lifting to meet his. For the first time since they had met, there was a softness in her expression and openness that hadn't been there before. "Now, we rebuild," she said, her voice steadier than he had ever heard it. "Not just the world around us, but ourselves." Leo felt a flicker of hope ignite in his chest. He had spent so much time thinking about survival, about getting through each day, that he hadn't stopped to think about what came after. But as he looked at her, the woman who had fought so hard to escape her past, he realized that the fight wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about finding a way to live again, to move beyond the ghosts that haunted them both. "Do you think we can?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but we'll find out together." Leo didn't have all the answers, but in that moment, he realized that the future wasn't a destination. It wasn't something that would just happen. It was something they would create together. They had been through hell, faced enemies that seemed invincible, and yet here they were standing side by side. With the chance to build something new, the first rays of dawn broke through the smoke-filled sky, casting a soft light over the ruins. It was a new day, a fresh beginning, and as the woman turned toward him, a quiet resolve in her eyes, Leo knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Not as fugitives, not as victims of their pasts, but as two. People who had chosen to walk forward, no matter the cost. They didn't need to say anything more. The silence between them was no longer heavy with doubt or fear. It was a silence filled with possibilities. Together, they would move forward into whatever the future held. A new beginning, one step at a time.